Hey everyone, welcome back to Motion UX. Ivan Witteborg here, and today we're going to make our After Effects components or pre-comps even more powerful. Let's dive in. All right, so here we are inside of After Effects, and we just have a simple interaction set up here where we are tapping on this microphone. It's opening up the mic, recording a message, dictating a search term here, going into this processing mode, and then back to the default state. And we want to be able to make this pre-comp more dynamic and more reusable. So maybe we're using this interaction many different times. Maybe sometimes the dictation moment is 2 seconds, 5 seconds, a minute long. And we want to be able to stretch this to match what we had before. And if we remember in our previous video, we used protective regions to do like an intro animation and an outro animation of one pre-comp. But that doesn't really work when we have things happening in the middle, or maybe we have 3 or 4 different things happening in one pre-comp that we want to say, hey, trigger this part of the animation or trigger this part of the animation. And so that's what we're going to do here with some help of some expressions and time remapping. And before I go any further, I want to reference where I found this method from. This is from a really old video from Workbench, and I'll link it all in the description below. He writes up all the expression of what he does here, and it's based off of a very old expression from Dan Eberts that basically uses markers to trigger specific moments in a pre-comp, okay? What Joe from Workbench does is he expands upon that and adds some time stretching as well. So we'll dive into what that looks like in our After Effects projects. But I also always want to make sure that I'm giving credit to who deserves the credit. All right, jumping back into our After Effects file, let's go ahead and look at our keyframes, and let's go ahead and mark when each state change happens in our animation. And so right here is when we go from default state to listening state. We go from listening state to processing. And here we go from processing back to default. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and label these. So we're going to say listen, or we can say mic on, we'll say processing, and then we'll say back to default, or just default, back to default. And that should be good. And then we'll just add another one here just for default. So if we remember in the protected regions, our markers split, right? So that we could select a section of time in which our animation would cover. We can do that manually here by holding down the Alt or Option button and just dragging this. And we can then drag this and drag this and drag this. And so we're splitting these markers and we're saying, hey, during these 2 points is when this animation will start and when this animation will end. And so I'm just making sure that all of these marker in point and out points are set up correctly. And so this one actually goes from there all the way over to here. And then back to default goes from here all the way over to here. Okay, now let's go back to our main comp and we'll do the old update markers. So we'll do this, update markers from source. And you can see we have default, mic on, processing, back to default. Okay, and by default, nothing special is happening yet. So I can move these markers around. It doesn't really change what's happening in the actual animation. So what we need is we need that expression. So if we go back over here, we can take Joe's expression. The way that this works is that we have to apply it to the time remapping property. So if we right click this, we can go to time and enable time remapping. And we will option control click on it, and we will paste in that expression. So let's take a look at what that actually did. So if we go ahead and move our markers around, we can shrink them, we can make them bigger. Nothing is happening unless we actually pass a specific marker. So if we go over this one, you see that it's triggering what's happening inside of this, which is everything between this in and out point of that specific marker. So that mic on, that's what's happening when we pass over that. But we're actually able to move and adjust when that happens in our composition, giving this a little bit more flexibility when we reuse this component again and again and again. I can also say, hey, maybe I want this mic on animation to happen over the span of like 2 seconds. We can actually stretch that. And now that animation is slowed down and stretched over a certain amount of time. Maybe we want the processing state to happen much, much quicker, so we can actually shrink that to be like significantly quicker. So you might be able to start to see how using this expression with these markers allows our compositions to be much more flexible and dynamic, and how we're able to reuse them and make them work for our specific context. So let's say in this specific flow, we want to tap at 2.5 seconds, okay? So what we need to make sure is that this is gonna be all the way. It's gonna be default from the very beginning, and it's not until we tap on this that we're gonna do a mic on. And that mic on animation only needs to be very, very short. So we tap on it. And this point right here, it's just when we're talking, right? And so maybe we're going to be talking for up until 5 seconds. And then at that point, we're going to be doing some processing. We're going to actually like process that audio, and then we're going to send it off. And I want that to happen over a longer period of time to have more realistic latency there. And then after that happens, then we're going to go back to our default state. And let's play that and see what it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to tap on it. The mic is on. It's now listening to us. It's going to go into the processing state and then back to default. And what's great about this is that we can trigger all these different animations. So maybe we want to tap to get the mic to listen to us and then interrupt that listening state and just go back to default. And so let's see how we could set that up right here. So we're going to duplicate our tap. It's going to happen right here. Okay, so right here is when I need a marker that says mic on. And I can go ahead and do this, split the marker, rename it mic on. And now you can see the mic on animation is happening here. Let's shrink that a little bit, make sure that that's accurate. Okay, and then what we want to happen is we want it to just go back to default immediately. So let's go ahead and open up a marker back to default. And we're going to stretch that. So if we go ahead and make sure that we have the tap as well. So we're going to tap it on and tap it default off. So we can see it has this leftover ring from the processing state. So that means we didn't actually account for animating from the listening state directly to off and back to default. And so what we need to actually do is go back into this animation and we just need to add that. So what we need to do is we need to add that state where it's going from mic on directly to back to default without that little ring around it. And the easiest way to do that without messing up the existing animations that we have is just to do that animation over here where we have some free space. So let's just recreate that animation happening right here. So we're going to get this ellipses over here. And this is okay that this just pops on like this, okay? Because we're only triggering by markers. So let's just go ahead and go to this state because our goal is to go from here to gray. And so if we got this, we're going to go forward a few keyframes. We're going to go to gray and change the opacity of this circle to 0. So now we have the appropriate animation going from this to this. And we need to add a marker. Let's spread that out and let's change it from on to off is what we'll call it. So now all of our animation still looks good as it should. The back to default, boom. And then this is on, and we just need to change this from back to default to on to off. And once we do that, we can see it now has the appropriate animation there. And so in using this method, it kind of changes the way that you think about creating your animations in comps. This, when you play it forward, it doesn't really make sense, especially in this part right here, going from back to default to on to off. It doesn't make sense at all, but it doesn't matter because we only need between the markers to make sense, and then how we sequence the markers to also make sense. And so this gives us the flexibility just to mix and match where we want to put these markers in our actual composition. And like most things like this in After Effects, there's actually a plugin called Marker Remap. It's a paid plugin that automates a lot of this process for you. Let's go ahead and delete all of the markers from this composition and also remove our time remap, okay? So we just have this normal composition where we started with in the beginning. What we can do in one click, we can just click Enable Time Remapping. It will automatically apply the expression Enable Time Remapping for us all automatically. And then what we can do is actually, as we're scrubbing through here, we can say, oh, okay, yeah, right here is when we need to turn it on. I can actually see what markers are in this pre-comp and just click it, and it will apply that marker, having the same duration and timing as what's going on inside of here. So I'm not actually stretching the timing of the animation if I don't need to. So I wanted to do mic on, I wanted to do some processing, and then I wanted to go back to default right there. And then right here, I want mic on again. And then right here, I want it to go on to off. And so now very quickly, I'm able to lay down this entire animation just by clicking all the different states that I want to apply for this specific composition. And so this plugin really helps speed up that workflow in a very, very simple way. And that's how we supercharge our Motion UX workflow. By using that simple expression with timeline markers, we're able to allow our compositions to act more and more like components, state changes, and all of those amazing things. I hope this has been helpful for your workflow, and I will catch y'all next time.